He said it through the window like a man who has never once been recorded doing anything he regretted, which tells you everything about what kind of man Officer Travis Loomis believed himself to be. The phone he was talking about belonged to Darnell Carter, 28 years old, a high school science teacher who had been pulled over on Westfield Boulevard for a broken rear taillight that was not, in fact, broken. Darnell had turned on his phone's camera the moment the patrol car's lights appeared in his mirror. He held it against the door with his right hand, angled up at the window. Loomis didn't ask Darnell to put the phone away. He said it the way someone states a policy. He said, "You put that phone away," and then he reached through the open window and slapped it. The phone hit the gear shift. It bounced onto the passenger seat. Darnell's hand was still open from where it had been holding the phone. He said nothing. He kept both hands visible on the wheel. The people in the car behind Darnell on Westfield Boulevard watched through their windshield. A woman on the sidewalk who had been walking her dog stopped. A man in a parked car across the street looked up from his phone. No one intervened. No one said a word. None of them knew about the dash cam. Not the standard issue city vehicle dash cam, which Loomis had, as it would later emerge, developed a habit of deactivating with a specific hand motion during traffic stops that he considered procedurally flexible. None of them knew about the other camera. The one that Darnell had installed 14 months ago. The one that he had never mentioned to anyone except his brother and one friend, because the installation wasn't illegal, but the conversation about why he'd installed it was the kind of conversation he preferred not to have in public. They had no idea what was already streaming. In 6 minutes, Travis Loomis's face was going to appear on a screen in front of more people than live in most countries, and the expression on that face was going to be one that his patrol supervisor, his union rep, and his own attorney would later describe independently of each other, using the same word, gone. Have you ever been in a situation where someone with authority over you in that moment had no idea that the moment was already being witnessed? Let me take you back. 14 months before Westfield Boulevard, Darnell Carter taught AP chemistry at Rosewood High School, 3rd period and 5th period, Monday through Friday. He had been teaching there for 4 years. He had a waiting list for his elective sections. His students passed the AP exam at a rate of 81% against a national average that ran closer to 58. He spent his own money, not extravagantly. He didn't have extravagant money, but consistently, on materials for labs that the district's supply budget didn't reach. He drove a 7-year-old blue Honda Accord with a clean interior and a parking permit for the Rosewood lot in the rear window. He drove the same route to school and back, Monday through Friday, for 4 years, because the route was consistent, and he had learned, from his own experience and from the experiences of men in his family and in his neighborhood, that consistency was a form of protection. Same route, same time. Same lane on Westfield Boulevard where the speed limit was clearly posted and where he stayed at the posted speed, not because he was timid, but because he had done the arithmetic on what being pulled over cost a black man in this city in time, in money, in documented record, in psychic overhead that never fully dissipated. His mother had given him, when he turned 25, a small medallion that she kept on a chain. It was a St. Christopher medal, the patron of travelers, that had belonged to her own father, Darnell's grandfather, a man named Theodore Carter who had driven long-haul freight for 30 years and who had carried the medal in the breast pocket of his work shirt the entire time. Theodore had died when Darnell was 14. Darnell had worn the medal since he was 25, on the original chain, under his shirt, against his chest. He wore it every day, including the day he was pulled over on Westfield Boulevard, including the day 3 weeks before that when he had also been pulled over on Westfield Boulevard by the same officer for the same non-existent reason and had been cited for a violation that his attorney had contested and won. That was 3 weeks ago? The citation had been dismissed. Loomis had not known about the dismissal when he activated his lights on Westfield Boulevard on the morning of the second stop. He knew Darnell's car. He had noted the plate in his personal records after the first stop, a practice that his department's written policy did not prohibit, but that the intent of the policy had never anticipated. And he knew the route Darnell drove, and he had decided to run the stop again on the theory that the second time might produce the outcome the first time hadn't. The dashcam issue was not new. The deactivation habit had begun, by the best reconstruction of the record, approximately 2 years earlier. Loomis had a method. A specific adjustment of the camera housing that looked, on review, like an incidental contact, that he had used on 12 separate occasions over the 2 years. Internal Affairs had been aware of a dash cam equipment complaint logged as a maintenance issue for 7 months. The complaint had been reviewed as a technical matter, not a behavioral one. No one had connected the 12 incidental contact events to specific stops. The connection would later be made by a data analyst working for the Oversight Board in a review that took 6 days and produced a finding of systematic evidence suppression. But that was later. Let me tell you about the 14 months before Westfield Boulevard, because Darnell Carter had not spent 14 months being passive. After the first stop, the one with the dismissed citation, Darnell had driven home and sat in his car in his parking spot for 11 minutes before going inside. He had not cried. He had not been frightened. He had been tired. The particular tiredness that is not about sleep, the kind that accumulates over years of doing the same arithmetic over and over and arriving at the same remainder, which is a number that doesn't balance. His brother Marcus, older by 6 years, an IT infrastructure specialist who worked remotely and had a particular interest in surveillance systems that had begun as a professional interest and had become a personal one, had called him that evening. They had talked for an hour. At the end of the hour, Marcus had said, "I have something for you." The device Marcus installed in Darnell's Honda was not dramatic. It was a compact, high-definition, wide-angle camera mounted at the base of the rear-view mirror with a second unit at the rear. Both units streamed to an encrypted cloud server and, at the touch of a specific sequence on Darnell's phone, which activated automatically when the phone connected to the car's Bluetooth, both units began a parallel live stream to a private channel that could be made public with a second input, also from the phone. The private channel had 3 subscribers, Marcus, Darnell, and Darnell's attorney, who had handled the dismissed citation and who had, upon being told about the installation, said, "I don't see a legal problem with this. Keep the footage stored. Don't tell anyone." She had not told Darnell not to stream it, because it had not occurred to her that the moment might arrive when streaming was the appropriate choice. It arrived on a Tuesday morning on Westfield Boulevard at 7:48. Darnell had seen Loomis's patrol car in the mirror a half-mile back. He had connected his phone to Bluetooth. He had initiated the private stream. He had pulled over, hands visible, engine off, before Loomis's lights even activated, because he was already stopping, a fact the camera recorded, a fact the camera was recording the entire time. When Loomis reached the window and said, "You put that phone away right now or I will put you away," Darnell's secondary phone, the one in the center console, visible only to Darnell's right hand, received a notification from the streaming app. It said, "Stream viewers, 847. His brother had been watching since the moment the Bluetooth connected. Marcus had shared the link to his own contacts within 30 seconds of the first words through the window. Darnell knew the number. He did not look at the phone. He looked at Loomis. When Loomis slapped the phone out of his left hand, the camera mounted at the rearview mirror recorded it from an angle that would later be described in testimony as ideal for evidentiary purposes, meaning it captured Loomis's face, his hand, the contact, the phone's trajectory, and Darnell's static and completely compliant posture, all in a single frame in 4K resolution. The stream viewer count at that moment was 11,000. Marcus had sent the public link to 2 journalist contacts he had from previous work and to 3 community accountability organizations he followed. Those organizations had subscriber lists. The organizations had pushed the link within 4 minutes of receiving it. Loomis wrote the citation. He did not notice the rearview mirror camera. He did not look at it. He walked back to his patrol car. He sat in his patrol car for 3 minutes before pulling away, standard procedure for running the citation, while 240,000 people watched him through the rearview camera's wide-angle lens. By the time Darnell reached Rosewood High School and parked in the lot, the stream had 900,000 viewers. By the time he finished second period, it had 4 million. By the time he walked to his car at the end of the school day, his attorney had called 4 times and his voicemail was full. The stream had 20 million viewers by 10 that evening. Loomis had no idea. He had finished his shift, filed his paperwork, left the building. He was at home when his cell phone began receiving calls from a number he didn't recognize, which he did not answer, and then from his union rep, which he did. Before I tell you what happened next, let me tell you about Theodore Carter. Because the St. Christopher Medal is not just a detail, it is the center of this story. Theodore Carter had driven long-haul freight for 30 years on routes that covered most of the eastern seaboard. He drove in decades when the interstate rest stops had signs, or the absence of signs, that told a man like Theodore where he could and could not stop. He had a copy of the Green Book, the travel guide for black motorists, that he kept in his cab until the late 60s, not as a curiosity, but as necessary information for the continuation of his life. He drove carefully, on routes he knew, at speeds that drew no attention, in vehicles he maintained meticulously, because Theodore understood, the way the men of his generation understood, that being stopped was an event with consequences that had nothing to do with the reason for the stop. He had carried the St. Christopher medal every single day. He had told Darnell's mother, and through her Darnell, that the medal was not about superstition. Christopher carried someone across a river, he said. He didn't know who he was carrying. He found out on the other side. He said, "You carry what you're given. You don't always know its weight until you reach the other side." Darnell had thought about that story more times than he could count. He thought about it in the car after the first stop. He thought about it in his car in the school parking lot, listening to his voicemail with the city outside and 20 million people somewhere watching a screen. He was carrying what he'd been given. He had reached the other side. The Westfield Boulevard stop had occurred on a Tuesday. By Friday, Loomis had been placed on administrative leave. The department's announcement used the phrase, "pending review of dashcam protocols and use of force-adjacent conduct," which was the most cautious possible framing of a situation that contained no ambiguity. The dashcam deactivation was confirmed by the technical review team on Wednesday. The 12 stops were identified by the data analyst on Thursday. The Friday announcement was the department getting ahead of a press conference that had been scheduled by the City Oversight Board for Monday. The Oversight Board's Monday press conference was attended by 11 reporters, 2 television cameras, and 1 woman in the back row who had been the complainant in one of the 12 dash cam stops and who had been told when she filed her complaint that the dash cam had malfunctioned. She sat quietly through the presentation and left without speaking, and 2 days later, her attorney filed a civil suit on her behalf. 5 other complainants from the 12 stops filed within the following 3 weeks. The 6th was in the process of filing when the department and the city announced a joint settlement process, which they announced not because they wanted to, but because their legal counsel had reviewed the footage, all the footage from all 12 stops, and had advised them, in writing, that a settlement process was substantially preferable to the alternative. Loomis was terminated at the end of the administrative review, which took 6 weeks. The union filed a grievance. The grievance was reviewed by an arbitrator. The arbitrator's decision was issued 6 months later. The arbitrator sustained the termination. The criminal referral for evidence tampering in connection with the 12 dashcam deactivations was made by the Oversight Board to the District Attorney's Office. The DA's office assigned the case to its Public Integrity Unit. The unit spent 4 months building the file. The charges, when filed, were not a surprise to anyone who had spent those 4 months paying attention. The department, under pressure from the Oversight Board and from a city council that had watched 20 million viewers watch a Tuesday morning traffic stop, entered into a negotiated reform process. The process mandated an independent audit of all dashcam equipment and associated maintenance records for the preceding 3 years. It mandated redundant recording systems for all traffic stops. It mandated a public-facing dashboard, a publicly accessible database showing dashcam operational status for every vehicle, every shift, in real time. The dashboard went live in the spring. It was called the Transparency Portal. The department had initially proposed a different name. The Oversight Board had declined the different name. Darnell continued teaching AP Chemistry at Rosewood High School. His students' pass rate on the AP exam the following year was 84%. He used a portion of the civil settlement, the terms of which were partially sealed, but which his attorney confirmed was appropriate to the conduct, to fund a lab renovation at Rosewood that the district had approved in concept, but not in budget for 3 consecutive years. The renovation included a set of new fume hoods, a digital spectrometry unit, and a storage system for reagents that had previously been kept in a leaking cabinet in the supply room. He also funded in his grandfather's name a scholarship for graduating seniors at Rosewood who planned to pursue degrees in the sciences. The scholarship's name was the Theodore Carter Excellence in Science Award. The first recipient was a girl named Jasmine who had spent 3 years in Darnell's AP class, who had written her application essay about the relationship between chemistry and justice, and who enrolled at a state university in the fall to study environmental engineering. Darnell was at the ceremony when the first award was announced. He stood when Jasmine's name was called. He put his hand on his chest, over the chain and the medal, the way a person touches something that matters when they need to know it's there. Go back to the beginning of the video. Go back to the moment when the phone is slapped, before Loomis turns to walk back to his car. Watch Darnell's hands. They go back to the wheel, both hands, immediately. No hesitation. No look at the secondary phone. No reaction on his face that Loomis can see through the window. Just hands on the wheel and eyes forward, the posture of a man who knows that the moment is being held by forces that have nothing to do with what is visible through the window. He knew about the camera. He knew about the stream. He knew what was already in motion. And he showed none of it. That is something specific. That takes something specific to produce. His grandfather drove 30 years carrying a medal and a green book and that same knowledge, that what is seen is not always what is real, and that the real thing is sometimes best protected by stillness. If this story moved you, and I think it found you for a reason, hit like, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Tell me in the comments, have you ever stayed calm in a moment when you knew something that the person across from you didn't? What did that cost you to hold? Here's what really gets me. It's not the 20 million. The 20 million is a number. Numbers are easy. What gets me is the 11,000, the number when Loomis reached into the window. 11,000 people were already watching. 11,000 people saw it live in the moment as it happened, and Loomis had no idea. He was operating on the assumption that the only witness was himself. He was 30 years behind the available information. He was writing a citation in a world he had not updated his model for, while 11,000 people watched him do it, and the number kept climbing. Here is my question. Not the big dramatic question, or the quiet one. At some point in your life, have you been Loomis? Have you acted on the assumption that you were not being witnessed and been wrong? Not the illegal version, not the dramatic version, just the human version. A moment when you assumed no one was watching and found out later that someone was. What did you do with that information? Tell me below. The comments on this one are going to matter.